The blood on Kathleen Wilcox's hands wasn't her own, but it might as well have been. Standing in the doorway of her father's study, she stared at the contract that had just cost him his life, a document bearing a forged signature that now claimed to own her future. The year was 1876, and in Jordan Valley, Oregon, a woman's fate could be sealed with less ink than it took to write her obituary. "Miss Wilcox, your father's debts are substantial," Mr. Hargrove said, his voice cutting through her grief like a dull blade. The banker's fingers drummed against the mahogany desk her father had once sat behind. "The terms are clear. You have two choices: marry my son Edmund or work off the debt at my establishments." Kathleen's throat tightened. At 22, she knew exactly what kind of establishments Hargrove owned on the edge of town. Her father's body wasn't even cold, and already vultures were picking at what remained of her life. "I never signed this," she whispered, picking up the contract with trembling fingers. The signature at the bottom was a poor imitation of her handwriting. Hargrove's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Your father did. As your guardian, he had every right. My father has been bedridden for months. This signature is dated 3 days ago. Are you accusing me of something, Miss Wilcox?" His voice dropped dangerously. Kathleen felt the walls of her father's study, now Hargrove's property, apparently closing in around her. The banker had been circling their modest ranch for years, waiting for her father's illness to claim him. Now, with Thomas Wilcox dead from consumption, nothing stood between Hargrove and the fertile land that bordered his own holdings. "I'll need time to consider," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You have until tomorrow morning," Hargrove replied, standing to his full height. "Edmund will make you a fine husband. He's always admired your spirit." The way he said the word made Kathleen's skin crawl. Edmund Hargrove was 35, had buried 2 wives already, and looked at her like she was a mare to be broken. When Hargrove finally left, Kathleen collapsed into her father's chair. The house that had been her home for her entire life would be stripped from her by morning. Her father's ranch, the Double W, would soon become part of Hargrove's growing empire. And she would either be Edmund's wife or working in Hargrove's saloon on the wrong side of town. Unless she ran. Night had fallen by the time Kathleen finished gathering what she could carry. A few dresses, her mother's silver hairbrush, the small amount of money her father had hidden beneath a floorboard, not nearly enough to start over, but perhaps enough to get her to her aunt in California. The sound of approaching horses made her freeze. Through the window, she saw lanterns bobbing in the darkness. Hargrove hadn't waited until morning after all. She fled through the back door, racing toward the stables. Her mare, Penny, nickered softly as Kathleen threw on a saddle with practiced hands. The voices of men grew louder as she led Penny out the back of the stable and into the shadows of the pine trees that bordered the property. Just as she mounted, the first gunshot split the night. "Find her." Hargrove's voice carried through the darkness. "Edmund wants his bride." Kathleen dug her heels into Penny's sides, and they plunged into the forest that separated her land from the neighboring ranch. Branches whipped at her face as they galloped through the trees, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. She had no plan beyond escape, no destination beyond away. The moon cast silver light through the canopy as they raced through the forest. When they finally broke through the tree line, Kathleen pulled Penny to a halt to catch her breath and get her bearings. The Circle R ranch stretched before her, its main house dark except for a single lamp burning in a downstairs window. Owned by the reclusive Ross family, it was the only property in the valley that Hargrove hadn't managed to claim yet. Kathleen had never spoken more than a dozen words to any of the Ross clan. The eldest son, Ryker Ross, had returned from the war years ago and kept to himself. People in town whispered that he'd come back changed, harder, more dangerous. But he'd also stood against Hargrove more than once at town meetings, which made him an ally of sorts. A dangerous gamble, but the only one she had. As she approached the ranch house, a figure emerged from the shadows of the porch, rifle in hand. "State your business," a deep voice commanded. Kathleen raised her hand slowly. "I seek sanctuary. Hargrove's men are after me." The figure stepped into the moonlight, revealing a man in his early 30s with dark hair and a face weathered by sun and hardship. Ryker Ross was tall and broad-shouldered, his stance that of a man who expected trouble and knew how to meet it. "Hargrove?" he asked, his grip on the rifle relaxing slightly. "He claims my father's land through a contract I never signed. He wants me to marry his son." Ross's expression darkened. "Edmund Hargrove is no husband for any woman." The distant sound of hoofbeats made them both turn. Lights bobbed at the edge of the forest. Hargrove's men had found her trail. "Please," Kathleen whispered. "I have nowhere else to go." Ryker Ross studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Get inside, quickly." He helped her dismount and led Penny around to the back of the house while Kathleen hurried up the porch steps. Inside, the house was sparsely furnished but clean. A fire burned low in the hearth. When Ross returned, he carried her saddlebags and a shotgun. "Stay away from the windows. They'll be here soon." True to his word, within minutes, hoofbeats thundered into the yard. Kathleen peered through a gap in the curtains to see 5 men, including Edmund Hargrove himself, approaching the house. Ryker stepped onto the porch, shotgun resting casually in the crook of his arm. "Evening, gentlemen. You're a long way from town." Edmund dismounted, his movements unsteady. He'd been drinking. "We're looking for Kathleen Wilcox. She's run off, and we have reason to believe she came this way." "Haven't seen her," Ryker replied evenly. Edmund's face contorted with anger. "She's my property by rights. My father has the contract." "A woman isn't property, Hargrove, not even in Jordan Valley." "You're harboring her, aren't you?" Edmund spat. "My father warned me about you, Ross. Said you'd caused trouble ever since you came back from fighting for the wrong side." Kathleen saw Ryker's shoulders tense, but his voice remained calm. "I'm going to pretend you didn't say that on account of you being drunk. Now take your men and get off my land. Or what? Or I'll remove you myself." The quiet menace in Ryker's voice made Edmund take a step back. Edmund's eyes narrowed. "This isn't over, Ross. That woman belongs to me, and I mean to have her." "Good night, Hargrove." For a tense moment, Kathleen thought Edmund would push the confrontation. Instead, he spat on the porch steps before remounting his horse. "We'll be back. With the sheriff." "Sheriff Kent's welcome any time," Ryker replied. "You aren't." The men rode away, and Ryker watched until they disappeared down the road before coming back inside. He found Kathleen standing in the middle of the room, her hands clenched at her sides. "Thank you," she said. Ryker set the shotgun down. "They'll be back, with the law most likely." "Sheriff Kent is in Hargrove's pocket." "I know." He gestured toward a chair. "Sit. Tell me about this contract." Kathleen sank into the offered seat, exhaustion suddenly weighing on her. "My father died yesterday morning. Before his body was cold, Hargrove arrived with papers claiming father had borrowed heavily against the ranch. There was a contract with my signature, agreeing to marry Edmund if father defaulted on the loan. And you didn't sign it." "No, I would never." "The signature is forged, and poorly at that." Ryker's jaw tightened. "Hargrove's been trying to get his hands on your land for years. Connects his property to the river. You know a lot about my family's affairs, Mr. Ross." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Small town, and I make it my business to know what Hargrove is up to. Why? Let's just say he and I have history." Ryker moved to the fireplace, adding another log. "You can stay tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do. I was headed to California. My mother's sister lives in Sacramento. Ryker shook his head. Hargrove will have men watching the roads and the stage. You wouldn't make it 10 miles. Then what am I supposed to do? Kathleen asked, desperation creeping into her voice. I won't marry Edmund Hargrove. I'd rather die. No one's dying, Ryker said firmly, and no one's forcing you to marry. We'll find another way. Kathleen looked at him curiously. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Ryker's expression grew distant. Let's just say I know what it's like to have your choices taken away. Before she could ask what he meant, he showed her to a small bedroom at the back of the house. Get some rest. You're safe tonight. As he turned to leave, Kathleen called after him. Mr. Ross, what did Edmund mean about you fighting for the wrong side? Ryker paused in the doorway, his back to her. I rode with the Union. Edmund's father supported the Confederacy in secret, of course. Oregon was a Union state. That hardly seems like the wrong side. It is to men like the Hargroves. With that cryptic statement, he left her alone. Kathleen sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of her situation. In the span of 2 days, she had lost her father, her home, and nearly her freedom. Now she was hiding in the house of a man she barely knew, a man with secrets of his own. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of running through endless forests while Edmund Hargrove's laughter echoed behind her. Morning brought the smell of coffee and bacon. Kathleen found Ryker in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up as he worked at the stove. An older man sat at the table, nursing a cup of coffee. Miss Wilcox, this is Samuel, Ryker said by way of introduction. He works the ranch with me. Samuel nodded in greeting. Heard about your father. He was a good man. Thank you, Kathleen replied, accepting the cup of coffee Ryker offered her. Samuel rode into town at first light, Ryker continued. Hargrove's telling everyone you stole valuable items from the house before running away. Says he has legal claim to everything, including you. Kathleen's hands tightened around the cup. That's absurd. The house was my father's. Everything in it belongs to me now. Not according to the contract he's waving around. Samuel cleared his throat. There's more. Edmund's been drinking at the saloon, boasting that he'll have you as his wife by week's end. Says his father's already spoken to the preacher. I never agreed to any of this. Kathleen's voice rose in frustration. Doesn't matter to Hargrove, Ryker said grimly. He's been buying up half the valley for years. Your father's land was the last piece he needed. What about your ranch? Kathleen asked. A shadow passed over Ryker's face. He's tried, failed. He won't try again. Something in his tone warned Kathleen not to press further. Instead, she asked, what can I do? I can't hide here forever. No, Ryker agreed, but you can fight back. How? Hargrove owns the bank, has the sheriff in his pocket, and half the town fears him. We need to see that contract, Samuel interjected. If the forgery is as bad as you say, we might have something to work with. Ryker nodded. Samuel's right, and we need to know exactly what your father borrowed against. Land, the house. Both. I don't know, Kathleen admitted. Father handled all the business affairs. He never spoke of financial troubles. Probably because there weren't any, Samuel muttered. Thomas Wilcox ran a tight operation. Everyone knew it. A knock at the door silenced their conversation. Ryker motioned for Kathleen to stay in the kitchen as he went to answer it. She heard the deep voice of Sheriff Kent in the entryway. Morning, Ross. Heard you had a visitor last night. News travels fast, Ryker replied coolly. Small town. Mind if I come in? Actually, I do. Unless you have a warrant. There was a pause. Look, Ryker, I'm not here to cause trouble. But Hargrove's raising hell about the Wilcox girl stealing valuables and running off. Says she's set to marry his boy. And you believe that? Doesn't matter what I believe. He's got papers. Papers can lie, Kent. You know that better than most. Another pause, longer this time. Is she here? If she was, do you think I'd tell you? Sheriff Kent sighed audibly. Hargrove won't let this go. He wants that land and he'll use the girl to get it. Then maybe someone should stop him, Ryker challenged. Someone like you. Haven't you learned your lesson about crossing powerful men? Some lessons are worth unlearning. The sheriff's voice dropped. Tread carefully, Ross. Not everyone remembers you fondly from before the war. The door closed and Ryker returned to the kitchen, his expression grim. He knows I'm here, Kathleen said. He suspects. Different thing. Ryker poured himself more coffee. But he's right about one thing. Hargrove won't let this go easily. What did he mean about you crossing powerful men? Kathleen couldn't help asking. Ryker and Samuel exchanged glances. That's a story for another time, Ryker said. Right now, we need to focus on your situation. Samuel cleared his throat. I might have an idea. My cousin works at the bank. She handles the filing. If anyone can get a look at that contract without Hargrove knowing, it's her. Ryker nodded slowly. It's worth a try. But we'll need to be careful. If Hargrove's suspects were investigating, he'll know I'm here, Kathleen finished. Exactly. Ryker's eyes met hers across the table. Which means we need to move quickly. Samuel left after breakfast to speak with his cousin. Kathleen, restless and worried, asked Ryker if there was anything she could do to help around the house. You don't need to earn your keep, he told her. I'm not trying to. I just need something to do besides worry. Understanding flickered across his face. There's mending if you're handy with a needle. She spent the morning sewing torn shirts and patching work pants while Ryker tended to ranch business. By midday, Samuel returned with news. Eliza says the contract is there, right enough, he reported. Says it looks official at first glance, but when she looked closer, she noticed the paper was different from the bank's usual stock. Different how? Ryker asked. Cheaper. Thinner. The bank uses heavy bond paper with a watermark. This had none. Kathleen leaned forward. What about the signatures? Your father's looks genuine enough. Yours. Samuel hesitated. Is a forgery, she supplied. I know that much. Eliza says it doesn't match the signature card they have on file for you at the bank. Ryker's eyes narrowed. Can she get us a copy of the contract? Samuel shook his head. Too risky. Hargrove keeps it locked in his desk, but she did find something interesting. There's no record of a loan to Thomas Wilcox in the bank's ledgers. What? Kathleen and Ryker spoke simultaneously. If the bank loaned money to my father, there should be a record, Kathleen said. Exactly, Samuel confirmed. Which means either the loan was personal from Hargrove himself, not the bank, or… There was no loan at all, Ryker finished. The implications hung in the air between them. We need that contract, Ryker said finally. How? Kathleen asked. We can't just walk into the bank and take it. A slow smile spread across Ryker's face. No, but we might not have to. That evening, after Samuel had gone to his cabin for the night, Ryker explained his plan to Kathleen. The bank hosted a monthly dinner for its most valued customers, of which Hargrove, as the owner, was naturally included. The dinner is tomorrow night. While Hargrove is occupied, I can get into his office and find the contract. That's breaking and entering, Kathleen protested. Do you have a better idea? She didn't. Besides, Ryker continued, it's not stealing if we're retrieving a fraudulent document that threatens your freedom. And if you're caught, his expression turned grim, I won't be. Why are you doing this? Kathleen asked, studying his face in the firelight. You're risking so much for someone you barely know. Ryker was silent for a long moment. I told you Hargrove and I have history. What kind of history? He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. Before the war, my father owned most of the land Hargrove now controls. When I left to fight, Hargrove saw his opportunity. He convinced my father to take out loans against the property. By the time I returned, my father was dead, and Hargrove owned everything except this piece we're sitting on. How did you keep this ranch? It was in my mother's name. She died years before, and the deed transferred to me directly. Hargrove couldn't touch it. I'm sorry about your father, Kathleen said softly. So am I. His eyes met hers. Hargrove has been taking what doesn't belong to him for too long. I won't let him take your freedom, too. The next day passed slowly. Kathleen helped with chores around the ranch house, trying to keep her mind off what Ryker planned to do that evening. When dusk fell, he changed into his good clothes, a black suit that made him look more dangerous than refined. If I'm not back by midnight, he told her, wake Samuel. Tell him what happened and have him take you to his sister's place in Baker City. You'll be back, Kathleen said with more conviction than she felt. Ryker hesitated at the door, then reached into his pocket and pressed something into her hand, a small Derringer pistol. Just in case. After he left, Kathleen paced the floor, alternating between praying for his success and cursing herself for involving him in her troubles. The clock on the mantel seemed to tick more slowly with each passing minute. Just after 10 o'clock, she heard a horse approaching. Gripping the Derringer, she moved to the window and peered out. Relief washed over her when she recognized Ryker's tall form dismounting. He entered the house, his expression unreadable as he placed a leather portfolio on the table between them. Did you find it? Kathleen asked. Ryker opened the portfolio and removed several papers. I found more than I expected. The contract was on top, the forged signature clearly visible at the bottom, but beneath it were other documents, deed transfers, loan agreements, and letters. What are these? Evidence, Ryker said grimly. Not just against what Hargrove is doing to you, but what he's been doing for years. These letters show he's been forging documents, threatening people, bribing officials, including our esteemed sheriff. Kathleen stared at the papers. This could ruin him. That's the idea. Ryker picked up the contract with her forged signature. This, however, is the most pressing matter. He moved to the fireplace and held the paper above the flames. Wait, Kathleen said. Don't we need that as evidence? Ryker turned to her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. We have copies of everything else. But this, he shook the contract slightly, this is the chain around your neck. As long as it exists, Hargrove can claim you agreed to its terms. He was right, Kathleen realized. As long as the contract existed, she would never truly be free. Burn it, she whispered. Ryker hesitated. Are you sure? Yes. He dropped the paper into the flames. They watched in silence as the document curled and blackened, the forged signature disappearing into ash. When it was gone, Ryker turned to her. What do you want, Kathleen? Not what your father wanted, not what society expects. What do you want? No man had ever asked her that question before. Kathleen found herself momentarily speechless. I want. She faltered, then found her courage. I want my home back. I want justice for what Hargrove has done, not just to me, but to you and everyone else he's cheated. And I want the freedom to choose my own path. Ryker nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll fight for. The next morning brought a thunderous pounding at the door. Ryker opened it to find Sheriff Kent, red-faced and agitated, with 4 deputies behind him. Ryker Ross, you're under arrest for breaking and entering and theft of private property. Kathleen stepped forward. He's done nothing wrong. Stay out of this, Miss Wilcox, the sheriff warned. Mr. Hargrove reported a break-in at the bank last night. Important documents were taken. You mean forged contracts and evidence of corruption? Ryker asked calmly. Kent's expression faltered. I have a warrant for your arrest. Don't make this difficult. Oh, I think it's already difficult, Ryker replied. He reached into his coat and pulled out a letter. especially since I've already sent copies of Hargrove's correspondence with you to the federal marshal's office in Portland." The sheriff's face drained of color. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Ryker handed the letter to Kent. "Read it. It details how Hargrove paid you to ignore certain activities in town, including the forging of documents to steal Kathleen's property." "This proves nothing," Kent blustered, but his hands shook as he read. "The rest of the evidence is on its way to Portland," Ryker continued. "Should arrive by tomorrow's stage, unless you'd like to arrest Hargrove instead of me." The sheriff crumpled the letter in his fist. "This isn't over, Ross." "Actually, I think it is." Ryker nodded toward the deputies. "Your men might want to know that the federal marshals take a dim view of corrupt local law enforcement. Anyone associated with you when they arrive might find themselves sharing your cell." The deputies exchanged nervous glances. "We'll go," Kent spat. "But Hargrove won't let this stand." After they left, Kathleen turned to Ryker. "Did you really send everything to Portland?" A slow smile spread across his face. "Samuel left at dawn with the documents, but Kent doesn't need to know the marshal hasn't received them yet." "That was a dangerous bluff." "Not a bluff. Just a matter of timing." Ryker's expression grew serious. "Hargrove will retaliate. We need to be ready." They didn't have to wait long. By afternoon, smoke was visible rising from the direction of the Double W Ranch. "He's burning my home," Kathleen whispered, watching from the porch as black smoke billowed into the sky. Ryker's jaw tightened. "He's trying to destroy any evidence that might be there. We have to stop him. It's too dangerous. That's exactly what he wants to draw us out." But Kathleen was already moving toward the stable. "That's my home, Ryker. Everything I have left of my parents is there." He caught her arm. "Kathleen, wait. We need a plan." She whirled to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Every minute we wait is another piece of my life burned to ash." Their eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Ryker nodded. "We'll go together, but we do this my way." They rode hard across the valley, Samuel following with 3 ranch hands. As they approached the Double W, they could see flames consuming the barn. The main house still stood, but smoke poured from the windows. Edmund Hargrove and 2 men stood watching the destruction, bottles of kerosene at their feet. "That's far enough," Ryker called out, his rifle aimed at Edmund's chest. Edmund turned, his face contorted with rage. "You stole from my father. Now we're taking what's ours." "This property doesn't belong to you," Kathleen said, dismounting and stepping forward. "It never did." "The contract was forged," she cut him off. "And now it's ash, just like what you're trying to do to my home." Edmund's eyes narrowed. "It doesn't matter. Your father's debts were fictional," Ryker interjected. "We have the bank records to prove it." One of Edmund's men shifted nervously. "Maybe we should go, boss, if they've got evidence." "Shut up," Edmund snarled. He pulled a pistol from his belt. "I'm not leaving without what's mine." "Put the gun down, Hargrove," Ryker said quietly. "You don't want to add murder to your crimes." For a tense moment, Edmund's hand wavered. Then, with a growl of frustration, he aimed at Kathleen. The shot that rang out didn't come from Edmund's gun. Ryker had fired first, the bullet striking Edmund's shoulder. He dropped the pistol, howling in pain. "Next one won't be so merciful," Ryker warned Edmund's men. "Take him and go. Tell Hargrove we have everything: the forged contracts, the letters, the evidence of bribes. By this time tomorrow, federal marshals will be here." The men hesitated, then helped the bleeding Edmund onto his horse. "This isn't over," Edmund gasped through clenched teeth. "Yes, it is," Kathleen said firmly. "For your sake. I hope your father has enough money to get you out of the territory before the marshals arrive." After they fled, Kathleen and the others worked to extinguish the barn fire. The structure was lost, but they managed to save the house with only smoke damage to show for Edmund's vindictiveness. As dusk fell, Kathleen stood in her father's study, surveying the room. Someone had ransacked it, likely looking for any documents that might incriminate the Hargroves. But the most important papers, her father's will, the original deed to the property, had been stored in a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards that the intruders had missed. Ryker found her there, holding her father's pocket watch. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Kathleen nodded. "I will be. The house can be repaired. And the barn rebuilt," he added. She looked up at him. "You've done so much for me already, I can't ask for more." "You didn't ask, I'm offering." He stepped closer. "Kathleen, I've been alone on my ranch for a long time, too long maybe. Helping you these past few days has reminded me what it's like to fight for something worth fighting for. A piece of land. No, a future." His eyes held hers. "Your future, maybe our future." Kathleen's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I admire your courage, your determination, and I'd like to help you rebuild if you'll let me." As a neighbor, a smile tugged at his lips. "To start with, the rest, well, that would be up to you." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Through the window, Kathleen saw a group of riders entering the yard, but these weren't Hargrove's men. The lead rider wore the badge of a federal marshal. "Looks like Samuel got to Portland faster than expected," Ryker observed. The next few days passed in a whirlwind. The federal marshals arrested Hargrove and his son, along with Sheriff Kent. The evidence Ryker had gathered proved damning, not just the forged contract that had threatened Kathleen, but years of corruption and fraud that had allowed Hargrove to build his empire on stolen land and broken lives. Many of Jordan Valley's residents came forward with their own stories once Hargrove was behind bars. Properties that had been taken through forged documents or coerced sales were returned to their rightful owners. The bank was temporarily placed under federal control until new management could be appointed. Kathleen threw herself into rebuilding her ranch. The barn would take time to replace, but the house was quickly restored. To her surprise, neighbors who had kept their distance during Hargrove's reign now offered help, bringing meals, lending tools, offering labor. And always there was Ryker, steady and reliable. He came each morning to help with repairs, often bringing Samuel or other ranch hands with him. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, talking about their childhoods, their dreams, the changes coming to Jordan Valley now that Hargrove's shadow no longer loomed over the town. One evening, as summer gave way to autumn, Kathleen found herself watching Ryker as he split firewood for her winter supply. There was an ease to his movements that belied his strength, a quiet confidence that had grown as the weight of his vendetta against Hargrove lifted. "You're staring," he said without looking up, a smile in his voice. Kathleen felt a blush warm her cheeks. "I'm admiring your technique. My wood-splitting technique, among other things." He set down the axe and turned to face her. "Such as your patience, your kindness. The way you stood up for me when no one else would." Ryker crossed to where she stood by the porch steps. "I think you would have found a way to fight Hargrove with or without my help. You're stronger than you know." "Perhaps, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out alone." Kathleen took a deep breath. "Ryker, when you spoke of our future, what did you mean?" His expression grew serious. "I meant that I've grown to care for you, Kathleen, more than I expected to, more than might be wise given all that's happened." "Why wouldn't it be wise?" "Because you've just regained your freedom. The last thing you need is another man telling you what your future should be." Kathleen stepped closer to him. "There's a difference between being told what my future will be and choosing it for myself." "And what would you choose?" he asked softly. "I would choose someone who asks what I want instead of telling me. Someone who fights beside me, not for me. Someone. She hesitated, then found her courage. Someone like you. Ryker's hand came up to cup her cheek. Are you sure? I'm not a wealthy man. The Circle R is smaller than your ranch. I don't care about that. Kathleen covered his hand with hers. I care about the man who burned a contract that would have enslaved me, then asked what I wanted instead of telling me. I care about you, Ryker Ross. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. When their lips met, Kathleen felt as though a final piece of herself had fallen into place, a piece she hadn't known was missing until now. The kiss deepened, and Kathleen wound her arms around his neck, drawing him closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. I should probably court you properly, Ryker murmured, his forehead resting against hers. Kathleen laughed softly. I think we're past the point of convention, don't you? Nevertheless, he insisted. You deserve to be courted, Kathleen Wilcox. And court her he did. Through the autumn months, as Hargrove and his son awaited trial in Portland, Ryker came calling at the W with flowers and small gifts. He took Kathleen on picnics by the river that separated their properties. They rode together through the Golden Hills, planning improvements to both ranches. In town, people watched their courtship with approval. Kathleen found herself welcomed into circles that had previously excluded her, not out of malice but out of fear of Hargrove's retribution. Now, with the banker gone, Jordan Valley seemed to breathe more freely. Winter came early that year, with the first snow falling before Thanksgiving. Kathleen had invited Ryker and Samuel for the holiday meal, along with several neighbors who had no family nearby. The gathering was warm and festive, the dining room filled with laughter that had been absent during her father's long illness. After the guests departed, Ryker lingered, helping Kathleen clean up. They worked in companionable silence, and when the last dish was dried and put away, he took her hand and led her to the parlor. The fire crackled in the hearth as they sat side by side on the sofa. I have something for you, Ryker said, reaching into his pocket. Kathleen expected another small gift, a book or perhaps a brooch. Instead, he withdrew a folded document. What's this? She asked, taking it from him. A partnership agreement, he replied, for our ranches. Confused, she unfolded the paper and scanned its contents. It proposed merging the W and Circle R into a single operation, with profits and responsibilities shared equally between them. A business partnership, she asked, trying to hide her disappointment. Ryker's eyes crinkled at the corners. Look at the last page. She turned to the final sheet and found not legal language but a handwritten note. Kathleen, this agreement, unlike the one that nearly cost you your freedom, comes with no obligations. Sign it only if you wish to. Tear it up if you don't. But know that whether you choose to join our ranches or keep them separate, I hope you'll consider joining your life with mine. I love you. Ryker, tears blurred her vision as she looked up at him. Are you proposing? He took her hands in his. Yes, awkwardly it seems. Kathleen laughed through her tears. Not awkwardly, perfectly. She squeezed his hands. Yes, to all of it, the partnership, the marriage, the future. Ryker's smile could have lit the darkest night as he pulled her into his arms. Their kiss sealed promises far more binding than any contract. They were married on New Year's Day, 1877, in the small white church in Jordan Valley. Samuel stood as Ryker's best man, and Eliza, Samuel's cousin from the bank, served as Kathleen's maid of honor. The ceremony was simple but joyous, attended by neighbors and friends who had stood by them through the tumultuous past months. As they exchanged vows, Kathleen thought of how close she had come to a very different fate, a loveless marriage to Edmund Hargrove, or worse, a life of servitude in his father's establishments. Instead, she stood before a man who had given her back her choices and then waited patiently for her to choose him. The federal trial of the Hargroves began in February. Kathleen and Ryker traveled to Portland to testify, staying in the city for nearly a month as the case unfolded. The evidence was overwhelming, not just their testimony, but that of dozens of others who had suffered under Hargrove's corrupt practices. In the end, both Hargroves were convicted. The elder received 20 years in federal prison, Edmund, 15. The judge's words at sentencing echoed in Kathleen's mind long afterward. The true crime here was not the theft of property, but the attempt to steal a woman's freedom through fraud and intimidation, a despicable act that this court cannot punish severely enough. Spring came to Jordan Valley with new beginnings. The newly merged ranch, which they called the Double Circle, flourished under their joint management. Kathleen's knowledge of breeding horses complemented Ryker's expertise in cattle, creating an operation more successful than either ranch had been separately. Their home life proved just as harmonious. They chose to live primarily at the Double W, which was larger and more comfortable, using the Circle R house for ranch hands and occasional guests. Together they created a home filled with books, music, and laughter, a stark contrast to the silence that had permeated both their lives before. By summer, Kathleen had news to share. She told Ryker one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and crimson. "I'm with child," she said softly, placing his hand over her still flat stomach. The wonder that spread across his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. "When?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "February, the doctor thinks, while we were in Portland for the trial," Ryker laughed. "Justice and new life all at once. Poetic, isn't it?" She leaned against his shoulder. "Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He wrapped his arm around her. "I never thought I'd have this, Kathleen. After the war, after losing my father and fighting Hargrove for so long, I'd resigned myself to a solitary life. And now I can't imagine anything but this life with you." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "With both of you." Their son, Thomas Ryan Ross, was born on a snowy November morning in 1877. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's determined spirit, a combination that would serve him well in the years to come. As Jordan Valley grew and prospered without the Hargrove stranglehold, so too did the Double Circle Ranch. Kathleen and Ryker became respected community leaders, using their influence to ensure the town developed fairly, with opportunities for all its citizens. 3 years after Thomas's birth, they welcomed twin daughters, Elizabeth and Sarah. The house that had once seemed too empty to Kathleen now rang with children's laughter and the busy sounds of family life. One evening, as they prepared for bed after a particularly chaotic day with their 3 young children, Kathleen found Ryker standing at the bedroom window, gazing out at the moonlit valley. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. He pulled her into his arms. "About how different our lives might have been if you hadn't ridden to my door that night." "If Hargrove hadn't forged that contract, you mean?" Ryker shook his head. "No, that contract, as terrible as it was, led you to me. I can't bring myself to regret it entirely." Kathleen considered this. "I suppose in a strange way we owe the Hargroves our happiness." "I wouldn't go that far," Ryker chuckled. "But I am grateful for every day since you chose to trust me." "Best decision I ever made," she murmured, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. Over the years, Jordan Valley changed with the times. The railroad came through in 1884, bringing new opportunities and challenges. The Double Circle Ranch adapted and grew, eventually becoming one of the largest and most successful operations in eastern Oregon. Thomas, their firstborn, showed a natural aptitude for ranching from an early age. By 18, he was handling cattle drives to the railhead with the skill of men twice his age. The twins, though identical in appearance, developed distinctly different interests: Elizabeth toward teaching, Sarah toward medicine. Ryker and Kathleen supported each child's path, remembering too well what it was like to have choices taken away. When Elizabeth decided to attend the normal school in Portland to become a teacher, they saw her off at the train station with proud tears. When Sarah announced her intention to study medicine, still an unusual choice for a woman in the 1890s, they helped her secure admission to a college in San Francisco. Thomas stayed, working alongside his parents to continue building what would one day be his legacy. In 1898, he married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, bringing fresh energy and ideas to the double circle. Through it all, Kathleen and Ryker's partnership remained the foundation of their success. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, economic downturns and personal losses. Samuel passed away in 1890, leaving a hole in their lives that could never quite be filled. Kathleen's aunt died in California, leaving her the last of her family line, but new joys came too. Grandchildren arrived first from Thomas and his wife, then later from the twins when they returned to Oregon with husbands and careers of their own. The large dining table that had once seemed too empty was now barely big enough for family gatherings. In 1901, on their 25th wedding anniversary, Ryker surprised Kathleen with a trip to San Francisco, the city she had been fleeing toward on the night they met. They stayed in a grand hotel, attended the opera, and walked arm in arm along the bay, marveling at how far they had come from that desperate night in 1876. "You ever wonder what would have happened if I'd made it to California?" Kathleen asked as they watched ships entering the harbor. Ryker considered the question. "I think you would have built a good life here. You've always had that strength in you. But a different life," she mused. "Without you, without our children. Without Hargrove's constant threats," he added with a wry smile. Kathleen laughed. "I haven't thought about the Hargroves in years." It was true the banker and his son had faded from local memory, their empire dismantled, their influence erased by time and justice. "Good." Ryker took her hand. "They never deserved space in your thoughts." As they grew older, Kathleen and Ryker gradually passed more responsibility for the ranch to Thomas and his wife. They built a smaller house on a peaceful corner of the property, where they could enjoy the quiet beauty of the land they had fought so hard to protect while remaining close to family. In 1910, as Oregon prepared to give women the vote a full decade before the rest of the nation, Kathleen found herself reflecting on how much had changed. Since that night, she fled her home with nothing but a horse and a desperate hope for freedom. "You were ahead of your time," Ryker told her as they read about the suffrage movement in the newspaper, "fighting for your rights when most women couldn't." "I had help," she reminded him, squeezing his hand. "You had determination," he countered. "I just had a match to burn that damned contract." They both laughed at the memory that had, over the decades, lost its sting and become instead a cherished part of their shared history. On a golden autumn day in 1926, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Kathleen and Ryker celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The Double Circle Ranch had grown beyond anything they could have imagined, spanning thousands of acres and employing dozens of people. Jordan Valley had evolved from a dusty frontier town to a thriving community with a school, hospital, and bustling Main Street. During the celebration, their eldest great-grandchild, 7-year-old Rebecca, climbed onto Ryker's lap and asked, "Grandpa, how did you and Grandma meet?" Kathleen exchanged a smile with her husband. Over the years, they had told the story many times, though always adapted to suit young ears. "Well," Ryker began, settling the child more comfortably, "your grandmother was in trouble one night long ago. She came to my door needing help." "What kind of trouble?" Rebecca asked. "A bad man wanted to make her do something she didn't want to do," Ryker explained simply. "What did you do?" Ryker's eyes met Kathleen's across the room, a lifetime of love and shared memories passing between them. "I burned the paper that was trying to trap her. Then I asked her what she wanted instead." Rebecca considered this. "And what did Grandma want?" Kathleen crossed the room and placed her hand on Ryker's shoulder. "I wanted freedom," she said softly, "and then I wanted your grandfather." "And they lived happily ever after?" Rebecca asked. Ryker reached up to cover Kathleen's hand with his own. "We're still living it, little one." That night, after the last guest had departed and the house was quiet once more, Kathleen and Ryker sat on the porch of their small house, wrapped in a quilt against the autumn chill. The valley stretched before them, bathed in moonlight much as it had been on the night she had fled to his door. "Did you ever imagine we'd have all this?" she asked, gesturing toward the lights of the main house where their descendants now lived. "Not in my wildest dreams," Ryker admitted. "After the war, I thought I'd live out my days alone, fighting Hargrove until one of us was in the ground." "I'm glad it didn't come to that, so am I." He pulled her closer. "Do you remember what I asked you that night after I burned the contract?" Kathleen smiled. "You asked what I wanted. And now, after all these years, do you have what you wanted?" She rested her head against his shoulder, content in the knowledge that the frightened young woman who had fled her home that distant night had found not just safety but love, family, and a life richer than she could have imagined. "More," she said simply. "So much more."